Good morning. I'm Michael Hay, the Chief Technology Officer for the Americas for Hitachi Vantara. Been at Hitachi quite a number of years, twice lived in Japan. So I think Hitachi is quite an interesting company, and we're happy to be here to support ITI and talk to all of you. Hopefully you'll find my talk interesting. It's a bit about changing how you think about data. And kind of to start off, it's become very popular again these days, given what's happening with AI, compliance, and other analytics pursuits, to think about data as the new oil. You might hear about that a lot. And I think the question you have to ask, sometimes a metaphor and a way to think about data or another thing changes how you operate on it. Has that really helped users? Has that really helped developers do a better job with data? So is data that new oil? Well, if you think about at least what's happening with artificial intelligence today, there's 3 instances, and obviously there's a new MIT study if you look at that, but let's talk about things before it. Gartner has described about 85% of AI projects tend to fail, unsurprisingly because of lack of data preparation capability, lack of data integration, proper data sourcing, etc. McKinsey cites about 70% of AI projects fail, again, due to a lack of capabilities for data pipelines, lineage governance, data preparation. And finally, Forrester also cites a similar problem, 70% failure rate due to lack of preparedness with data pipelines. So it's a consistent problem, and at least I would suggest, or at least my hypothesis is, thinking about data as the new oil as opposed to perhaps a financial instrument is maybe not the best metaphor to help people think through how to use data, whether it's for something as simple as an analytics dashboard or something as complicated as an AI agent. In fact, I would suggest if data is the new oil, you might burn it. And if you carry forward with this thought, a lot of companies tend to treat data this way. They will put it into a dashboard, an analytics system, and think it's gone. They burned it up. It's finished. And to go get more data, they'll drill a new hole and data will magically come forward. And it's not disposable, the truth is, with data. It's long-lived. Unless you do something with it, it may hang around and lose value or gain in liability. It might become a risk to you if you've not well managed it. So thinking about data as oil is maybe not the best outcome. And I believe it's a failure of the metaphor that's kind of surfacing in the industry. So how I like to think about data is more like a financial instrument or a financial asset. It's something you have on the books. It can be a liability. It can turn into value. Your data needs a retirement plan, a pension, something like that. It's a very interesting metaphor. And it's kind of fun. It's more fun to think about data as an asset that will return benefits to the organization or something you have to manage for efficiency. So let's think about this for a minute. If I have a BI dashboard and my data is driving that BI dashboard, it's like simple interest in your bank account. You're getting some residual return as you interact with the data to help you make a decision. Now, if I carry forward and think about just that simple interest, that can be a little boring, right? In the US, at least, we have 401ks and we have large portfolios. I think the same idea carries forward here. So if you imagine a transactional system, and I've captured that data, again, it drives that dashboard, that's a simple interest. We want to get to a compounding idea, so things sort of work together. So if I go beyond that, beyond the monthly reporting, and I want to use the data to train a fraud algorithm, what ends up happening is I move from kind of simple interest to appreciation. So now the data is doing more, just like, say, my house, my real estate in a place that has grown up and gotten better. I can go further. Let's just say that there's new data that comes out of the fraud model. I learn what's happening to my customers. I learn what's happening in the dangerous world where there's perpetrators on my customers. Well, that then becomes the dividend. The result of the data is producing more data. It's coming back in the system. And now if I want to take that and combine it with customer transaction log data, it's like a portfolio strategy. So these things start to work in synergy together. It's identifying, if you want to take all of these different data sets together, maybe some opportunity to grow my business, looking for more services to help the customer do more with their money, more with their data, et cetera. So it becomes this portfolio strategy that returns some benefits. It becomes your asset. I can also turn the metaphor around and start to think about my burdens to comply. And a lot of companies, when they think about their burdens to comply, they're kind of resigned to the problem. And many of them store the data and forget about it. So it's like they're a data hoarder, don't know what's going on, et cetera. And they look at these compliance burdens as exactly that, a tax on the organization. Well, let's play with that word tax. So if I start to think about managing my taxes, I think about tax efficiency. I think about the right kind of accounts to harvest losses. The same thing would occur when I consider data codes like GDPR, HIPAA in the United States, DORA. All of these regulations turn into like almost a data tax code. So I start to think about perhaps using those regulations as a vehicle to understand how to become efficient with the process of managing my data tax. And smart companies have been doing this for a long time. They think about right placement of the data, maybe on expensive storage, expensive systems, lower cost systems. If you're considering different types of accounts, you might have a tax deferred account. That's like moving your data down in a cost scheme where I'm not paying the higher tax of access and high performance and high frequency and so on. There's other approaches where I'm looking at overall systems management of the data in a way that aligns to kind of my usage requirements. So I can go reverse from a tiering perspective. And those codes, those regulations, again, become my data tax codes. So again, smart organizations have been thinking through this problem quite a lot. Now, a key question is if I'm moving towards data as a liability or a tax and data as an asset, something that appreciates benefits, how do I get to that outcome? And it just so happens that you think about this idea of data products. So just as a show of hands in the room, who in the room has heard of data products before, that a discipline or an idea? Anyone? It's a very interesting approach to things. And a data product is essentially a way to treat and use data and manage it such that it's not on a per project basis. So it's not that idea of disposable data where I put it in a dashboard, throw it away, and try and find new data. I build it as a platform where someone who comes behind me can pick up the different parts of that platform and use it for a purpose I had not intended. So there's reuse capabilities. Again, it's like your data is paying a dividend back in some fashion or form. So when a lot of organizations think about data products, if they're heading in that direction, they may try and just assign simple project management and not consider that they're running a development process along the way to get to a repeatable outcome. Now I'm going to diverge here for a minute because I want to talk about a conference that I attended in Phoenix that included a lot of data and AI practitioners. And much to my delight, we had financial service organizations from large banks, we had agricultural businesses, we had insurance companies, et cetera. And there were several organizations there that had robust data product practices with data engineers, data product managers, et cetera, who would take requirements from users and figure out how to build reusable, repeatable data products. One such user actually was inside of a bank, and a part of the benefit and the reason why they were acquired by the bank is they hold data about small companies, about venture companies. So they actually hold contracts and they hold financial statements. And that's a part of their key value proposition that the bank purchased. And so that then becomes something that can be used for decisioning on investments for maybe high wealth individuals. So the data became a valuable asset and a product that they indirectly monetized. So it was a very interesting example for me and a great opportunity to understand the maturity of some organizations in terms of building data products. If you think through this product management, so another show of hands, how many people here have an engineering organization or function of some kind or work with engineering? No one? Few people? Great. So your disciplines related to product release, your disciplines related to requirements gathering, all of those things are important. And release of a product, release of an outcome. And you might be wondering, are there any public examples of data products? Well, one example, at least in the United States, is the ADP jobs report. So ADP is a payroll company. They service payroll for many organizations in the United States. They will have good awareness into new employees in an organization, so employees exiting an organization. They'll have view of raises and bonuses and other things. And that data is reused as an economic indicator. And my title here is the ADP Employment Report from Free to Fee. So that data product is something you all can access today. You can go look at it. You can download historical information about it. And that's the free teaser. So you can see in this particular example, over a period of almost 15 years, the change in different industries from an employment perspective. You can see, roughly between 20, I guess the COVID impact there around 2020 or so. So it's a good way to see and understand what's happened in the employment market in the United States that actually, when this comes out every month, impacts our economy. What's fascinating further down is there's several free teaser reports. You see them here, the National Employment Report, the Pay Insights reports that would help managers and HR departments. And there's other open reports available. But then what ADP does is they monetize secondary products for each of their customers. Right? So it's like this journey from free to fee, where they're trying to illustrate their value, and along the way, they have a tremendous impact on the economy. So there's no specific detail in pricing. I wanted to give you another example in just a moment that puts some economics assigned to data so you can understand sometimes how much that asset can return and help make decisions. And it's in a very different industry. So in the world of oil and gas, I don't know, some people here may be involved in oil and gas, but there's upstream, midstream, and downstream. And in the world of upstream is this idea of seismic data. And so what you see on the screenshot for my right hand, your left hand side of the screen, is a view into a data asset that Schlumberger has. So this is effectively their directory into a series of assets. You can see them kind of around the world. I zoomed in on one of them that shows onshore and offshore data about the underground. And that data about the underground is effectively, if you've ever had a sonogram, it's kind of like a sonogram of the underground. And people like geophysicists and drilling engineers and people that own the assets in the field look at these images that have gone through a series of steps, et cetera, to get to a decision, right? They're trying to decide how to improve the utility of a well. They're trying to decide if they're going to make an exploratory drill. And these are very impactful monetary decisions. So if I can get more oil out of an existing well that improves profitability, on the other side of it is if I drill an experimental well, I've just lost 50 million US. Huge mistake, right? And this industry is a very interesting industry. By 2030, from the devices you put out in the field to actually look at what's going on underground, and those include sensors and trucks and drones, and those sensors are tagged to satellites and contractors that go out and place these things and pick them up. It includes the data systems in the field. It includes the acquisition and removal of that data to a central site and the processing. That's a $36 billion market. It's a huge market. It's growing about 5.1% through 2030. And in the example here, is just a sample of a survey that's done on the land. And that survey will be either in what's called a proprietary mode. So I go to a company like Schlumberger and I say, for this area, I want you to come in and put the sensors down and do the study and give me the data and do everything like that. So that's how much that would cost per square mile. And then you have what Schlumberger has on the left. So they speculatively go do this in an area they think will provide some returns. And those returns mean they'll capture the data and then relicense it again and again. So directly generating revenues on a relicensing basis for seismic data. So to give you a sense of scale, you can sort of see the relicensed data that continues to compound and generate additional revenue versus the proprietary one that I own, about between $2.3 to $6.3 million. So it's a very interesting business that's all about the production of data as a product. I know it's a little bit of a dirty business, but it's still a good example, especially because, remember, we're comparing data, or at least I believe, incorrectly comparing data to oil. Now, a bit more about that summit that I attended and did a workshop at. The discussion was to compare these two things, compare data as the new oil versus data as a financial asset. What I found very interesting is everybody said yes to both. So we stepped through the idea of data as oil. We talked about data pipelines and data preparation, all of the things to lead to good AI outcomes that Gartner, McKinsey, and Forrester described. Heard about data products teams. Now the challenge that we ran into was, okay, well that's interesting. Sure, it's like oil. Then the next discussion was about data as a financial asset, data as a financial instrument. They said yes to that as well. So it's kind of hard to decode which people agreed with, except the time spent. The time spent talking about data as the new oil in an hour session was about 5 minutes. The time spent talking about data as a financial asset was more like 30 minutes. So there's an answer in the interest versus an answer in the response that I found quite fascinating. And of course, that led to discussions on data engineering, data as products, data development, et cetera. So before I proceed on, because I have a fairly short and succinct talk, any questions, and I'm open for discussion and comment, so I don't need to. No? Anybody have any answers? Okay. So what I've also found fascinating about data as a product, and this matches to engineering work. So I'm, by training and trade, as much a product management person. I've run large businesses from a products perspective, so billion-dollar businesses and analytics companies. And a challenge that I have found and have heard from industry personnel that are specialized in the teaching of product management is what you see in the middle, why. Discovering why a user wants to do something is a big problem. 95% of the time, product management and engineering companies are challenged to understand that part, and it was reflected in my discussion and dialogue, whereby I had several people talk about they're getting requirements from leadership. Nobody really knows why they're building anything. They're just ordered to construct and build something. And a bit of history in my background, I work obviously at Hitachi. We have engineers that have English as a second language, so we have a language barrier to overcome. And when we take our engineers to customers to hear what's going on, a long time ago, more than 20 years ago, we developed what is today's state-of-the-art product management discipline, recording customer interviews, doing after-action reports, transcriptions, things to really know what the customer said, things to be steeped in the problem, understand the why very deeply. And that matters. And so from an encouragement perspective is we need business people and technical people and potentially even engineering people close to users to understand what to build. That's true for products, that's true for data as products. So what you see here is an example of that I've learned. Well, so over 6 weeks, The goal is to talk to many users, understand their pains. Sometimes you hear, just like with my conference, contrarian views, so you have to kind of be smart, talk to your engineering team and pick apart what the discussion intensity is, discussion time, and be able to correctly articulate why you need to do something, why you're capturing data. Maybe it's for that compliance reason, maybe it's to build a new line of business, maybe it's to make a decision. How else can it be used? What's your liability? What's your benefit? Now, once you understand why, the next step is, well, what am I building? What am I building? And that's the role really of smart technical people in the products world, in the engineering world. What am I going to produce to solve the problem for my users, for my customers? And sometimes that is critical to make sure that you have shared understanding across engineering and product. Actually, all the time, it's important for that to occur. And if you can map the requirements back to the end user need, it becomes a self-answering question for leadership. So you turn the script on your leadership team, and when they ask why you're doing something, you can answer, here's the what thing, and it's tied to 15 or 16 users and customers sort of asking for this outcome. And the last thing you want to spend time on is how. How is it going to be implemented? How am I going to take my data, put it into something like an object store or a file store or a database, make sure I understand the schema, know what my long-term storage plan is, how am I compliant, like all of the requirements. That's the last thing you want to talk about. And so that comes with engineering doing work on feasibility analysis. So how hard is something to do, and then negotiating with the business and technical teams that are close to the customers to get to a conclusion. Sequencing the priority and getting to an outcome. Now, again, I've talked about all of this. By the way, if you're familiar with this circular concept, maybe some people have heard of Simon Sinek. Sometimes see him on LinkedIn. He has this idea called the golden circle. I've changed it a little bit. So I've changed where how and why go, because I think there's a better ordering, understand why you're doing something, what you're doing, and how you're going to do it. He likes to flip those around. I did that again because of my product management background and understanding going from problem to how. And so this is the journey, like going from oil to data as a financial instrument, thinking about assets, tax burdens or compliance burdens, understanding how to build things on a reuse and repeatability basis, and using a product management discipline to be able to do that, an engineering discipline to be able to do that. So I'm going to try, and we'll see if folks are open to a discussion, to see if we can replicate and have a little bit of a conversation. Usually, most of these audiences, we talk to people, or most of these venues, we talk to people. So I'm going to try and see if some folks here are interested in talking about or asking questions about data products, product management, and the metaphor. Because I'm at the end of my pitch. It was intentionally succinct. So both to give you back time and also to try and see if we can get some engagement. So anyway, I saw that there was some folks from engineering discipline back there. Is data as a product something that you have thought about or engaged in at all, out of curiosity? Not yet. Something you would be interested in doing? Okay, very good. And if you don't mind me asking, what sector are you in? What? Public sector. Very good. Yeah, there's a bunch of, I know in the United States there's data.gov, Kaggle. There's a lot of, there's GitHub sites for logs, data, IT logs information. So there's a lot of interesting places where you can go get sample data sets, because when we do work to look at data systems and think about analytics and AI, one of the key problems is if you don't have enough data, or any data for that matter, then reaching a conclusion on AI is a bit of a challenge. And I've actually had some colleagues who've been involved in AI and ML projects, and they actually have gotten them killed because literally there was no data going into the system. So the team was 100% focused on their machine learning pipeline and forgot the data. So talk about a challenge from an economic outcome perspective for the consumers. Nobody asked the user what they were getting to a conclusion on. The users were themselves as engineers. Yes?
Michael, you mentioned this concept of compound interest.
Yes.
On data, and you gave an example of maybe using data for training in
Yes.
Do you have a few more examples like that? Because I think that's going to help. Because when I think about data as a financial asset, the fact that you can build certain benefits on top of past benefits is a very appealing idea, but it's a bit abstract. Any more specific, maybe use cases, industry stories, anything like that?
Absolutely. So one thing that I've been spending a lot of time on recently is emerging regulations around IT and systems logs. And those IT and systems logs are required by European Central Bank and the Reserve Bank of India to be stored mostly for the purposes of looking at security threats. And there's lack of clarity on how long to store things, and so there's kind of a default response, at least for Indian banks, to keep them for, say, a standard of 5 or 7 years. And you can imagine, if you've looked at those systems logs, depending upon how you pick the verbosity, they can get quite large fairly quickly. So from an operational perspective, let's start with kind of your choice of how you write things. We've done some experiments, say, pulling data from Amazon CloudTrail. So these are these systems logs, and it's very verbose, each message. What we've been able to find is by storing them in an object store the right way in what's called a parquet format. So parquet is a part of the movement to take the database table out of the database and put it independently on storage. So that's a powerful opportunity for customers to have free and clear control of their data. And it's been driven by customers to do this. Right? So as soon as I do that movement, it's compressed and of value because it's aligned to database engines. So it's queryable directly. And our experiments have shown, in the case of the Amazon CloudTrails logs, you can reduce from the source data size to what's stored by 90%. Okay, so just by thinking through this process and getting a benefit of improved query performance, I get a return. That's that kind of data products thought. Once I aggregate many of these systems logs, of course, I can use those for cybersecurity type of activities because I want to look backwards to figure out when I had the intrusion, when the threat was first, I could see the threat, right? Now I can project that forwards. I can find the events and the noise. So you can start to think about machine learning. You can start to think about outcomes that maybe help you predict when I have a challenge and a problem. A secondary benefit of that time series data that we're looking to play with is that's the start for our organization to help folks in the world of IT. But similarly, their business may have other numerical data, other time series data. And so we're building the data infrastructure such that not just can we help with logs, but they can also think about other time series information. Maybe it's physical security information. So I want to start tying physical security information. That's that idea of portfolio data. LiDAR sensors, who's coming into my organization, for example. Maybe I can want to do feature extraction from videos. And so that's when we start to maybe shift from the information security world to the physical security world. And by combining the two assets, maybe I can look for a more complicated attack scenario. And even further, when we start to think about time series data, and let's just stick with that thread for a moment, if I'm building this discipline in time series data, in numerical data, there's interesting things to do in the world of AI. So there's a company called Stripe. I don't know if people here know Stripe or not. They're a payment services company. And they've recently built a new foundation model for payments. No text, zero text. So they're using that foundation model for payments to improve their detection of fraud. And when they compare that to their old approach, which used machine learning and a curated pipeline, et cetera, that was 50 to 60% accurate. Their new model is about 97% accurate. Right? So there's this methodology of thinking how I store, that improves my efficiency, so I'm managing my data tax. Then there's the idea of compounding so bringing the portfolio in of different data assets and each forward projection basically returning some benefit to me. And again, that portfolio strategy makes me get a holistic view of security that's not just associated to the IT systems, but also the physical systems, right? And then finally, I build the specialization in time series data. There's a lot of time series data. There's web clickstream data, there's sensing data, there's maybe audio information, right? that's the seismic data. So there's a lot of ways to think through that. And then once I built that specialty up, it could potentially help me in my business overall. So great question. Others? Happy to entertain a dialogue. Show of hands, is this of interest? Is this thought pattern a little bit more interesting than thinking about data as oil? Have you encountered either of these metaphors or thoughts before? Helpful? So at least heads are shaking. Yeah, yeah. What would you do that's different in your organization when you think about data, out of curiosity?
It's a great question because we're kind of small at the moment.
Sure.
It's hard to project ourselves to these kind of large projects and data management solutions. But I could probably see a lot of our clients that would maybe need those kind of this kind of way of thinking about data instead
Sure.
of just ingesting it and like not even treating it at the moment.
Right.
At times, but I'd have to, how can I say this, put more attention towards what my clients are doing and what
Right.
they are trying to collect in terms of data and how I could help them build this kind of data products
Yeah.
be able to leverage their data a bit more than what they do right now.
Yeah, so you don't, just because there's large data, there's also small data. So I have a hobby where I look at, of all things, industry classification systems around the world. And many of those data sets are a megabyte or less. But how to normalize across the different ones, how to heal. So I'll give you a very practical example. In India, they have an easily downloadable Excel document for declaring all of their industry classifications with descriptions and hierarchy, et cetera. But they forgot the topmost hierarchy. It's funny, right? It happens to be in a PDF. And so if I think about their industry classification system, and the one from Japan, and the one from the United States, the one from Mexico and Canada, so NAICS, and the one from Europe, and so on, how do you normalize them? You actually have to go gather the data across both and heal the outcome so it's consistent. So that's kind of a gap when it comes to having a quality data outcome. Those data sets are not very big, and when you transform them even in a Parquet, they get smaller. But the effort of treating it like a version data outcome, so I actually keep all of those in GitHub to manage them just like they're a part of the product lifecycle. So it doesn't have to just be for huge data. The discipline works for small data as well. Yep. Any other folks want to entertain a discussion? Otherwise, I will be done and turn you all loose. I'm here if you want to come up and ask questions separately as well. And I'm around for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.